The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast and a Premiership preview edition. Today we are all about Ross County, the we in question being me, David Currie, BBC commentator Liam McLeod and Staggies fan Mark MacDonald. Mark, hello there. I was going to call you a super fan. Would you describe yourself as such?
I think that's maybe a bit nice to call me that. I like to think I know as much as anybody else, but it's always been my club, and given that I'm pushing towards 30 now, it's almost the entire time we've been in the top flight. I can remember all of it. The first year we were in the top flight, I just turned 16, and it was the first year I was allowed to get a season ticket to go myself. So that was it's always been quite fun.
You're talking about being in the top flight. Have you got over the excitement of the Premiership playoff final? 3-0 down to Partick Thistle on aggregate, 20 minutes or thereabouts to go, and from the jaws of Championship football, another season in the Premiership was snatched.
Yeah, I don't think I have got over it. It still feels a bit unbelievable, really. But no, it came out of absolutely nowhere. I don't think any of us expected it. I was at the game at Firhill. I wasn't at the game in Dingwall, but I was at the game at Firhill and didn't see the comeback coming. And after watching the first half of the second leg, I don't think anybody saw the comeback coming, but it did. And yeah, it was quite the turnaround, and to hold on to it and get the victory on penalties really showed that the players really were sort of just playing for the club in the last sort of 20 minutes of that game and the extra time and penalties.
Tell you what, Liam, they must like living dangerously up in Dingwall, because season ticket sales are up on last season. 1,700 odds sold. I don't know if playoffs are included in that, mind.
Well, if they're like that one last season, they'll be more than happy to part with their money to pay extra for their season ticket for that. Albeit, I don't think Roy McGregor would agree. I think he'd want a more stress-free season. But I mean, I covered that game, and Mark's talking about it there. I mean, it kind of felt at the time, it was weird. I was doing it with Mikey Stewart, and it kind of felt as though the match was never going to end. At one point, we're 3 hours after kickoff time, just with all the stoppages, the VAR time that was added on as well, and then the penalty shootout and everything. I mean, it was a real sliding doors moment for Ross County, I felt. I just didn't see a way back for them. 20 minutes to play, as you say. They're 3-0 down. They'd lost the first leg in Glasgow, 2-0. They then were 1-0 down in the second leg. And it was just a ridiculous comeback. It's I think I said at the time, it's one of, if not the greatest comeback in Scottish football history. It really was. And, it's a game that will live long in the memory of both sets of supporters, but for the county fans in a very different way.
As that comeback, the remarkable comeback as described by Liam there, Mark, has that left you optimistic about the season which is to come?
Optimistic that it'll be slightly better, yes. I think I always come into a season with a large sense of reputation of who can we finish above. But no, if this season can be boring, I want it to be boring. Then if we can finish 8th or 9th and not really be worrying about anything come April, May next year, then that would be lovely. I definitely feel that the turnover of the squad hasn't been as large as it might have been. We've lost 4 or 5 and taken 6 or 7 in, but I did think it might end up being that a lot more players went. That still could happen, given we've got another 4 or 5 weeks of the window. But there's definitely the core of a squad there. Keeping Danda's going to be the big one. If we can keep a hold of him, I think we will be absolutely fine. If we lose him, I think we've probably already made some signings in Kyle Turner and Jay Henderson that can help us fill that gap. But yeah, I'm definitely optimistic that it can be a bit more solid than we were last season.
He's optimistic it can be a boring season for them, Liam. That's quite untypical for a Scottish football fan, is it not? They want it to be boring.
I can understand why, because those 20 minutes came from nowhere. I mean, Ross County, the worst home record in the league last season. They won 5 times, I think it was. They're going to need to up that if they've got loftier ambitions, which I know they do. Roy McGregor's a very ambitious man, not just for the club, but for the community as a whole up there in Dingwall, in Rossshire, and possibly even beyond. Mark's right. They've made a couple of really good signings there. I have to say, I think the signing of Scott Allardyce could be a huge one for them. I really like him. I know Doddsy loved him at Cally Thistle, and he's going to be, I think, a very important player for them. We know Jay Henderson, particularly perhaps for those who weren't watching Inverness last season or St Mirren beforehand. We saw him in the latter stages of the Scottish Cup last season and performed really well in the semi and in the final against Celtic as well. He's another good one. I think it's good they've got Josh Reid back. He's been there before, knows the club, knows what it's all about. And obviously Kyle Turner, who Mark mentioned there as well, had an excellent season at Partick Thistle last term. So yeah, I mean, I think Mark's right. I think they're going to need to add another few. But if I was a County fan, I'd be really excited about those signings. I think for County's level, and I know that they've been in the top 6 before, and that's what they'll be aiming for. First and foremost, Malky Mackay will be saying they'll be hoping that they are in 10th or above. That's where it'll start, just to avoid the relegation issues. But yeah, they might well be dark horses this season in Ross County, and we'll be looking back perhaps with even more amazement at those last 20 minutes against Partick Thistle on the final day of last season come the end of this one.
What is this? This is Malky Mackay's 3rd season in charge. What do you make of the job he's done thus far, Mark?
He's kept us in the league, and that is, I mean, I know we had the excitement of the top 6 finish in his first season. That was maybe not marred by not getting Europe, but certainly there was definitely a thought when April came round that Europe wasn't far away, and then it kind of petered out without much of even it coming close, and it didn't even come down to the final day in the end. And I think that top 6 finish was good for the club in terms of finances, good for the club in terms of getting the name back out there again, but also I think it created a false sense of where they really were in that season. There was a lot of poor results, and we started that season with 10 games before we got a win. So I think that was definitely a season where the final position wasn't reflective of what we were actually capable of.
I'm going to roll a cliche out here, Mark. Sorry, I'm going to roll a cliche out here and say the league table doesn't lie.
Yeah, I think it did that season somehow. But,
what we'd say about that, actually, Mark and David, is that a lot of other clubs, bigger clubs than Ross County, really underperformed that season. It was a very low points tally. So when you look at where Motherwell and Dundee United finished in the league and county there as well, I think that helped. I think it right up until the final matches before the split, you still had the likes of Aberdeen and Hibs had an opportunity to get into the top half of the table, but they failed to do so. I mean, fair play to County, Motherwell and Dundee United at the time because they took full advantage of it. But I think that had a big say on the final league positions the season before last.
Yeah, and I think that penalty at Pittodrie on that final game for the split that basically gave us 6th place and had locked Aberdeen out of it. That was a big penalty that probably changed. If we hadn't finished 6th that season, we could have finished 10th, or even really, if you're looking at it, you could have finished in a playoff spot after finishing the bottom 6. But as it was, we finished 6th and had that safety net going into the last 5 games. But I think overall, Malky's definitely done an absolutely passable job. I think there was definitely a possibility that he could have gone in the summer and been replaced. I possibly would have been leaning towards doing that, but I can see why they've stuck by him and let him build again. Like I said, there's the core of a squad there from last season that certainly looks like a Premiership club. But yeah, I think he's definitely done well in the first 2 seasons. I know last year was not great for long enough, but he's kept us up, and that's the MO really when you're a Ross County manager to start with is stay up and finishing higher ups bonuses, really.
Does that count, Liam, as being damned by faint praise? He's done a he's done a passable job. We'll keep you on.
I was just thinking that. I kind of know what Mark means by that, because I think Malky himself was disappointed clearly with their final league position last season, and to go from the top six to where they were, I think was a real reality check for the club as a whole. But I think what happened last summer was County lost players in the forward line who were so important to their top six finish the previous year, in Hungbo and Charles Cook. And whilst they were conceding a lot of goals the previous season, the season that's just finished, or last season, they were still conceding those goals, but they weren't scoring as often. And that's why they finished in 11th spot, and why they were pretty close to being automatically relegated going into those final few weeks. It was just the fact that although Jordan White stepped up to the mark, as he does, of course, he didn't have that supplementary help from the two that I mentioned there, and Hungbo, and in particular Reagan Charles Cook, who I think was a real star for Ross County, and they just didn't replace his goals, and that was the biggest issue. Because I'm sure you'll agree, Mark, that actually in the previous season, he kind of felt even if they lost a couple of goals, they could still get something out of the game because what they had at the other end of the pitch.
Yeah. Charles Cook and Hungbo, especially in that sort of January, February of that season, they were just unstoppable, really. Defences didn't know how to deal with them. It kind of got to the end of the season where teams would know what we were trying to do and would sort of double mark Reagan, or there'd be something tactically that would go on that would nullify those threats. But yeah, certainly we didn't make the replacements for Charles Cook and Hungbo last summer that were of the same standard, but you're never going to really replace it. It's a case of finding the goals elsewhere, which we didn't really do. I think Ross Callaghan was probably unlucky, because he was probably the one that was expected to kind of kick on and replace a lot of those goals, but couldn't. Danda obviously didn't really start well, but came into it in the end of the season. But yeah, we didn't replace it, and we tried to play a similar style of football, which didn't really work without the two main threats in it.
I think it'll be really important for Malky to be able to get Eamon Brophy fit now that they've brought him to the club on a full-time basis from St Mirren. If they can get him fit and they get the Brophy of Kilmarnock when Stevie Clark had him, they've got a right good striker there. But it's about getting him back to those levels. But he's on the payroll now, and if Malky and his coaching team can work with him, Don Cowie and the rest of them, then they could have a serious player on their hands there. And this is a guy who was in the Scotland squad a few years ago.
And he certainly showed it in the wee glimpse we got of him at the end of last season.
Yeah.
He was unlucky. I honestly think if Eamon Brophy doesn't get injured at the end of last season, we could have finished 10th. I'm excited to see how he gets on. Once he's fit and firing, he can be. There's a reason he was in a Scotland squad. As much as, yes, we were looking for the striking options at the time weren't great, and we were trying to see what would work. There was a reason that he was there. He certainly, if he can get. White had our top scorer was 11 goals last season. We've not really had we've only really had a 20 goal season striker in the last decade when we had Liam Boyce. If he can get anywhere close to that 20 mark, it'll be absolutely massive for the club and for himself. I mean, personally, it's obviously not where he thought he would be 2-3 years ago. He wouldn't have been expecting something for Ross County, but it's definitely looking at being a stepping stone for him and an improvement for the club.
No pressure then, you're expecting or hoping Eamon Brophy's going to bag you 20 goals. He's not been near that for a wee while.
Hoping, yeah. I mean, I think he's capable of it. I think he's certainly a player that I've always quite enjoyed watching. I think he's capable of it, and if he can do it, then great. If not, we've got Simon Murray as well, who I think between Murray, Brophy, and White, I think anyone in the bottom six would be happy with those three as a three to choose from or free to play along the front. Between those three players in White, Murray, and Brophy, if there's 10 each, even that's 30 goals, and that's a lot for a club like County.
Do you know what, Mark? I think as this podcast has gone on, you're getting more and more optimistic about things. You were talking about a scrap for survival earlier on. Now you're talking about guys getting 20 goals.
I wildly vary my expectations. It's certainly an exciting time, and there's certainly the players there that I think can push on for a top six, maybe even a wee cup run here. But it's always consolidation first, and then see where we can go. But hopefully it is one of those that the season takes off with us. That would be very nice.
If you keep talking, you'll have them qualifying for Europe in a minute.
Oh, that comes out all the time anyway.
But here's the thing, Mark. I want to discuss. Liam, you can. I'd welcome your comments on this as well. Malky was saying recently, we're going to have to punch above our weight once again just to stay in the division. Saying they're probably the club with the lowest budget. 5 or 6 clubs seem to have the lowest budget in the division.
I don't think we can say we've definitely got the lowest budget. I think we can definitely say that we've got the most sparse fan base in that it travels from such a wide area. We don't have quite a focus of population. There's the stat that Dingwall is smaller than the Global Energy Stadium, but the catchment of County is huge, really, when you're looking at Orkney, the Lewis and Harris, even the players coming from Shetland to play in the youth teams. You've got myself from North West Sutherland, you've got fans come from Caithness every week, and then the rest of Rossshire as well. So the catchment area is huge, and really the amount of money that Roy puts into it, not just on a footballing basis for the first team, but for the north of the country as a whole, is huge. The lowest budget thing, punching above our weight, we're not from a Central Belt team, but I don't think if you looked at it, we've kept it with season tickets growing, and we have a steady attendance that's up there with plenty of other teams in the division. So I don't quite agree with in the punching above our weight, but I do think we are in a golden period for the club, really.
I'm saying, Mark, you started off again, you're talking about finishing 10th, and now you've moved to a golden age for the club. I'm loving your optimism.
Golden age, yeah. I mean, it's as much as I'll always start with, I don't want to go down. I think the club has the potential just now to kick on and carry on. When we went down in 2018, it was possible that we didn't get back up again, especially with the Championship at the time having ourselves. I think Dundee United, St Mirren had just gone back up and had struggled for a few years. There was every potential. We didn't come back up, but Roy put the investment into the club to get it straight back up, and we've done well to stay there since. And I think with the budget we've got, we're the best will in the world. In 50, 60 years' time, you're probably not going to have a benefactor that are going to back a club quite the same way. So we've got to try and make hay while the sun shines. But yeah, it's a great time to be supporting Ross County and getting to go to these games, like getting to go to Parkhead on opening day, getting to go to Ibrox and stuff. There are games that 20 years ago you wouldn't have thought was possible with the club, really.
What a time to be alive and to be a Ross County fan. So then, Mark, without fear or favour, what I'd like you to do is predict County's position at the end of the season. You can be as precise, or I'll let you be as vague as you like.
I'll go precise, and I'll go with 8th. I'll go with a boring 8th. I'll go back to my boring golden age.
Liam, a boring 8th for County.
Well, it's an improvement on last season, isn't it? For a start. So yeah, I'm sure they'll have ambitions that will lie higher than the table than that. And like I say, I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's a dark horse this season finishes in the top half. We saw St Mirren do it last term. And quite frankly, if St Mirren are going to finish in the top 6, then Ross County have no reason to believe that they can't finish in the top 6. They've got recent history of doing it themselves. Obviously did it in their first season in the old SPL back in 2012. So yeah, I think the County fans, whilst I'm not going to make a prediction, because I just don't do that, because I'm always wrong, I think the County fans can look forward to better times ahead this time around. And
that's my favourite Paul Gascoigne quote, Liam, is I don't make predictions and I never will.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Right, I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks to Liam McLeod and Ross County fan Mark MacDonald, and thanks to you for listening to a Scottish football podcast Premiership preview.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.